Campsites. Many of us, maybe most of us, want to find epic campsites every time. And I mean, why wouldn't we? After all, it's part of the reason many of us are out here is to find amazing places to camp. So who doesn't love awesome, right? Welcome to the Robert Witham Show, a weekly podcast where we discuss travel, nomadic lifestyle, simple living, and minimalism. I'm your host, Robert Witham. Thank you for joining us in this episode. Epic versus utilitarian campsites. You know, you can't always find awesome. What? It's not possible to always find an amazing campsite. It's sad but true. Sometimes you need to settle for good enough instead of epic or awesome. We'll talk about this and more coming up. First, in Nomad news, stranded hikers are rescued thanks to a message in a bottle. Maybe you thought that message in a bottle thing was only for cartoons and old movies, but apparently it's the real deal. This past Father's Day weekend, so yes, the story's a few months old, but it's just now hitting national news to where I was able to pick it up. This past Father's Day weekend, Curtis Whitson was camping, hiking, and floating along the Arroyo Seco River, and I am probably pronouncing that wrong, in Central California with his girlfriend Crystal Ramirez and his 13-year-old son. The trio made it as far as the Arroyo Seco Narrows. Again, I'm probably mispronouncing the name of the river. A section where the river narrows and rock walls rise 40 feet straight up. The water was running too high to safely float through as they had planned, and a climbing rope that normally runs through carabiners bolted to the wall to allow people to safely enter the water was missing as well, so they decided it would not be safe to try and run that section of the river. They made several attempts instead at climbing up and over the rock walls, but were unsuccessful at finding a path through. They were stuck and could hear voices past the waterfall in the Narrows, but they couldn't see around a bend to see who it was. Whoever was on the other side did not hear the stuck hikers yelling for help. And I will note it's not clear from the articles I read why they were not able to hike back the way they came or, exit by some other means, but there was no criticism from California Highway Patrol or Search and Rescue or anything indicating that it was a frivolous there's frivolous complaint that they were stuck, so I have to assume that there's just something missing from the stories and not that it was a frivolous situation. They were carrying large backpacks with gear and sleeping bags and their tubes and other things and food, and that they did have experience hiking in that area many times, so it seems like there's probably something that's missing from the news story. Just wanted to throw that out there, unless you're wondering why they just didn't walk out a different way. Apparently they finally found a green water bottle, carved help or scratched help into the outside, and placed a note inside the bottle explaining why they were stuck and providing their location before sending it over the waterfall. The group retreated to an open beach area, spread out a blue tarp, and then used white rocks to spell out SOS for any overhead aircraft. Meanwhile, two hikers on the other side of the waterfall did indeed spot the green water bottle and retrieved it from the river. The hikers floated downstream with the bottle and hiked a couple miles to a campground to alert the camp host, who in turn notified authorities that somebody was stuck up there in the Narrows. California Highway Patrol helicopter crew located the stranded hikers later that night using night vision goggles and infrared cameras, and they were rescued the following morning. And so in this story, a message in a bottle actually worked to save a group of stranded hikers. It's not just a thing from cartoons or bygone eras. Evidently, it still can work. Obviously, you don't want to be relying on having to send a message in a bottle when you're out backpacking or hiking or exploring in your van, or whatever the case may be. But apparently, all else fails, you can send a message in a bottle and somebody might find it. So epic versus utilitarian campsites. I love finding epic campsites, and it's especially satisfying for me to find an epic campsite through my own research and exploration. And to be honest with you, I very rarely, if ever, find epic campsites from online databases. I mean, they're great for finding a quick place to stay when you're traveling through somewhere. Sometimes you find pretty decent places, sometimes not, but the really epic campsites people usually don't put online. They usually keep them a secret. But it's especially satisfying when I find it myself through doing some research, then going out and exploring. And as I often say, half a tank of gas in half a day, exploring around the desert or the forest, and maybe you find something and maybe you don't. Here's the problem, though. You cannot always find an epic campsite in the right area where you need to be at a given time. You cannot always find an epic campsite that meets all of your needs. It may be an amazing site, but it's missing one or two pieces that are kind of a problem. You also cannot always find an epic campsite quickly. It may take hours or sometimes even days of work to find that amazing, awesome site. So, as a result, sometimes it is necessary, or at least more reasonable, to settle for a utilitarian campsite that will hold you over for a bit. So, before we go further, let's define those terms. What is an epic campsite? Well, the answer is actually going to vary depending on each person's needs and preferences, but it's an awesome campsite that you don't want to leave. Some prefer the desert, some prefer mountains, some prefer water, So I suppose some might prefer the prairie. I don't think that's very fun. Some people I know like to camp in the city, and they think a great spot in the city is pretty epic, but you won't find me lining up to challenge them for those spots. So it varies a bit depending on your preferences. For me, it's going to include a few components. It's going to be beautiful views, solitude and stillness, wildlife, moderate temperatures, and good cell phone coverage so that I can work, since I'm a digital nomad. Again, the cell coverage is something that isn't an issue to some of you, and some of you, having no coverage actually goes towards making it epic because you don't have to worry about being disturbed. So again, it just depends on what an individual's needs are, and that's why, some of these online databases with their brief reviews, they're not very helpful. And so when you see our reviews on Meander, we try and provide enough detail that you can decide if it's going to be a good spot for you to visit or not. And so we'll share the things we think are good and things we think are maybe not so good, but then we try and share that so you can decide if it's going to be a good fit for you before you waste your gas and mileage on your vehicle going out there. So what you think is an epic campsite may not be impressive at all to me, and vice versa. What I think is epic or awesome, you may not be impressed with. So it really depends a lot on individuals. But with that said, what is a utilitarian campsite? Well, if you Google utilitarian, the first thing that's going to pop up is an Oxford Dictionary listing. And the definition tells you that it's an adjective and it's designed to be useful or practical rather than attractive. So if we tweak this just slightly, in context of using it as an adjective paired with campsite, or utilitarian campsite, is useful or practical but may not be attractive, awesome, or epic. Examples of this may include Walmart or Cracker Barrel parking lots, or Love's truck stop parking lots, roadside rest areas, or even a noisy campsite just outside of town that is noisy and trashed and busy, but at least it's easy to access. So those are some examples of utilitarian campsites. They're nothing to write home about, as we'd say, but it's a place to sleep. So I want to mention some examples from my autumn 2019 travel experiences, which I'm in the middle of right now. And I'm traveling from Wyoming all the way down Wyoming, north to south, and then down to Denver and across I-70. And across I-70, I have had to settle for more than a few utilitarian campsites. Here's the catch. Colorado can be challenging to find a good campsites if you're looking for free boondocking, as I often am. And just an aside, I'll throw out there, I also pay to camp at RV parks, county parks, city parks, etc. from time to time. It's not like I only boondock, but I do boondock as much as possible because it helps to keep the budget in check and allows me to put more money in the gas tank or spend more money at local stores and services. So it's just a choice of where you spend your money, and I'd rather not spend mine on rent. So if you're looking for free boondocking, and if you're looking to stay close to your route along major roads, and if you don't want to drive on four-wheel drive roads, or if you're not able to, I do drive on four-wheel drive roads in my van, but I'm also conservative in that I quit before it gets too bad. If it starts looking like I'm going to risk legitimately being risky breaking something, getting stuck, I'm turning around because I'm not interested in breaking something or getting stuck out there. Or if you need good cell coverage for work, the mountains make that challenging. You just have to be on the side of the mountain overlooking town or overlooking a big road where the towers are. Still not a guarantee, but it's a better chance than just getting out in the mountains with no thought for it. So, all right, I have encountered a lot of 4x4 trails in Colorado. I have encountered a lot of places in Colorado without cell coverage. I've encountered a lot of places in Colorado without enough sun exposure for solar energy because there were trees in the forest or mountain slopes blocking the sun. I've also experienced a lot of road or area closures here in Colorado along I-70. That's been a challenge. And I've talked to several other people in this area who have been running into the same thing. So it's not just me. This is a common set of problems. The result, in any case, I've had to settle for a lot of utilitarian campsites. Now, I'm not saying this to complain that I had to settle for utilitarian campsites. I knew coming down to Colorado there were going to be some challenges. I've been to Colorado a bunch of times before. I knew there would be some challenges. So I'm not like I didn't know this was going to happen, and I'm not complaining. I'm just sharing my recent experiences because they align with this topic. It's actually fresh, but this topic has been on my video to-do list for a while now. So we all love to find a campsite that inspires the soul and meets our needs and preferences. We all love that. I love it. It's an amazing thing when it happens. Unfortunately, sometimes those sites are just not available where we want or need to camp. There may be little or no camping in the area. Camping activity may be very busy, thus limiting availability even further. Camping areas may be closed or restricted without warning. Running into that here. Road conditions may limit access to some areas. And they may be 4x4, or the road may be washed out, or if it was graded a long time ago, it might be okay, but if it hasn't been graded in a while, you may find it's not passable. And cell coverage or sun exposure for solar may not be available. There may be too much forest, like we dealt with in Oregon, or like I deal with in Colorado here, where there's just too many trees in a lot of places. So you have to get out of the forest. But again, national forest land is usually forest. Now, up in Wyoming, for example, we have some pretty good big meadows in the forest, but still, there's a lot of forest where the trees create a problem for solar. So, what I want to do is, if you're new on the road, or if you're getting ready to get on the road, I just want to warn you of the reality here. Because sometimes expectations are different from reality. When I first hit the road, I can tell you my own story. Full-time, 4 years ago, I thought it would be easy to find epic campsites that met my needs. And the reality turned out to be quite different. So why did I think that? I'd been traveling part-time for years. I'd been traveling for short blocks of time, full-time for long blocks, however you want to say that. I've been traveling off and on for my whole life, and I was familiar with a lot of the areas I was going, so why did I think it would be easy? Well, so many people who were out here doing it I wasn't watching videos very often back then, but on blogs and in social media and other places like that. It's the few videos I did watch, they made it sound easy. Well, it's not. Some things are easier. I mean, it's more cell coverage now than it was 5 years ago, for instance, but there's still plenty of places you can't find coverage, or you're not going to find coverage unless you do, if you need high amounts of bandwidth like I do, So I thought that because some people intentionally or unintentionally misrepresented things and made it sound easier than it was. And so I always try to share a balanced view instead, and I try and be objective and share both sides of things to the best that I can, so that if you're thinking about doing this or you're new doing this, you're getting accurate information so you can make good decisions and you can have your expectations set in line with the way things are probably going to be for you, so that you're not disappointed and frustrated because somebody sold you, a bill of goods. All right, so there is good news, though. I want to, that's, we'll get to this now. There's good news. The next epic campsite may be just down the road. Even if you can't find one today and you have to settle for Utilitarian today, the next one may be just down the road. And a lot of times you don't know where that's going to be. After 2 weeks of making my way from Wyoming toward the desert, I've stayed at a whole bunch of Utilitarian campsites. None of them has thrilled me. I mean, not one. Not even one. This weekend, I stumbled upon an awesome campsite that I'm thoroughly enjoying. And this is in an area in western Colorado where I didn't expect much. I've been through here before, and I just didn't expect much, if anything. I wasn't even sure I'd find anything in western Colorado, and that I wouldn't just be going on into Utah towards some leads I had there and some places I know for sure will work over there, because I've been there before. So here it is. I'm driving down the road, not expecting much, and I stopped to do a little exploring, and lo and behold, I found an amazing campsite. Interestingly, I ended up on the same primitive BLM road as a viewer who I was already trying to meet up with while in the western Colorado area. We hadn't been able to quite connect to organize a get-together, and lo and behold, I'm driving down this primitive forest road, and I get to the end to turn around and go back and find a spot to park a little further back up, and he comes up behind me on his bike and says, "Hey, you must be Robert." Yeah, so lo and behold, it was Jared, who we'd already been trying to connect. So I got to hang out with he and his wife Jordana for a couple of days and a night, and that was a whole lot of fun. So we hung out till they had to go back into town. So that was really cool. But but this is in an area where I didn't expect much of anything. And I ended up with an epic campsite and getting to meet a couple of wonderful people at a place that I expected little to nothing. And I wasn't even sure I'd be stopping in Colorado again. So you just never know when you are going to run into them. But usually you do take a little exploring to go find. But while we were here, too, we were able to take a hike and go explore a nearby cave that they'd spotted in the distance the day before. So that was really cool as well. I mean, getting to just exploring like that. So there are epic, awesome campsites out there. No matter your definition of epic or awesome, they're out there. But sometimes it's also necessary to just settle for a campsite that gets the job done for a night or two or a week or whatever it is. Just a place to park or to sleep until you're able to move on down the road and find a site that does speak to your soul. So this may all sound obvious, but it's easy in this day and age of Instagram and keeping up with the Joneses online to think, oh, so-and-so's always got epic campsites. Oh, so-and-so is always in awesome places. Yeah, or they're photoshopping and manipulating their images to be selective in what they show you. Or, that they don't mention the 3 times out of 4 or the 9 times out of 10 they strike out, and they're only showing you the good ones. That could be too, right? But in this day and age of Instagram, I think it's important where always got the best foot forward in terms of the perfect vacation and the perfect meal and the perfect campsite. I think it's important to mention once in a while, just to reframe expectations that those sites are out there, but you don't end up there every night usually. Sometimes you have places that are just okay too. And so if you understand that and keep that in mind, I think you're less likely to be frustrated and maybe worse than frustrated because things aren't as you thought they would be. So time for listener questions, and we actually didn't have any questions last week. There's no questions on YouTube, and the other place you can supposed to be able to leave questions is on my website beneath the show notes, and apparently that somehow accidentally was turned off. I don't know when or how, but apologies if you tried to leave a comment on the show notes from the previous 2 episodes. They're back on now, so you can do that. But we don't have any questions. We did have a whole bunch of comments, so I selected a few that I thought were interesting and entertaining. And it doesn't mean that I did not think the others were interesting or entertaining, but I did have to limit the number I could choose to share here. So M.A. Enriquez, oh funny, I thought the title was about how old a person could still be to do the life, LOL. And that's a reference to the title of the episode 2, where how old is too old. So no, I'm not talking about how old you are. I'm talking about how old the Vans are. I would not dare to touch that topic. All right, Buddy and Doug's Big Adventure. Doug says, I got so lucky with my 94 G30, paid $400 for it 3.5 years ago, and have put over 50,000 of its 193,000 miles. Not counting regular oil changes and a set of tires, I have had to put less than $500 back into it and have never been stranded anywhere. So, Doug, thank you for sharing that, and that is awesome, and that does highlight a few interesting things, and that's, vehicles will reach a point where they're old enough they're hard to get parts for, or they'll reach a point where they have enough miles on them or old enough they're just falling apart and you always have to fix them. Until that happens, it's not too old, in my opinion. And some people, like I said in the previous video, in the previous podcast, some people like having a vintage rig and they're willing to put up the aggravation of parts being hard to get and stuff. But for most people, we're not going to want to deal with that. So as long as you can get parts for it readily, and as long as it's not breaking down all the time, which has a lot to do with how well it's been maintained, as we talked about before. But any decent vehicle that's been well maintained, you should be able to get a lot of miles out of these days. Yes, on average, you're probably going to put more repairs into an older vehicle than a newer one with lower miles, but that's not absolute, and sometimes that doesn't even hold true. So sometimes it actually is way cheaper to maintain an older vehicle that's a good quality vehicle that's been well maintained than it is to maintain even a several-year-old vehicle. So that wasn't built as well. So it just comes down to the vehicle. If you try and find a decent vehicle with a good reputation, make sure it's well maintained and continue to maintain it well and treat it good, and hopefully it'll go for you for a long time. And I wanted to mention too that Doug talks about buying this thing dirt cheap and not put much into it. I've had several vehicles like that as well. As a matter of fact, some of the best vehicles I've had have been come to me very cheaply, usually from a friend or an acquaintance who makes a good deal, and the person, so you may know how they maintain their vehicle. In these cases I did, and so I had really solid vehicles that I got very inexpensively for different reasons. Maybe there were cosmetic issues with it or some quirks or whatever, and those have been some of the best vehicles I've owned. I've driven them all over the country. So speaking of those kind of vehicles, Peaches H, who bought the minivan from me 2 years ago now? A year and a half, I think 2 years in the spring? I think so. Anyways, she writes, Peaches writes, Gladys is still going strong. Love, love, love this format. So thank you. Glad you're enjoying the format, Peaches. And it's always good to know that it's always a little nerve-wracking to me. You sell somebody an older vehicle, you tell them everything. I tell them everything I know about it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but I'm still always a little nervous, like I hope this thing doesn't blow up on them next month, or next week. And so apparently the minivan's still going good for Peaches, so I'm glad to hear that. And that was one that was sold to me dirt cheap by a friend, and a Nomad, and so I passed it along inexpensively to Peaches as well, as I'm glad that it's still serving her well. And then finally, RV and Keep It Rolling says, I hope they pay you for my 10 comments. Unfortunately, they don't pay us for comments, but comments do help. There's a ton of things YouTube looks at when they're deciding which videos might be worth sharing with people or recommending to people, and amongst them are how many people are watching and how long they watch before they leave, and likes and comments. And the point is that, without trying to game anything or anything funny like that, YouTube wants to recommend good videos to people, videos they're going to enjoy watching. And so if they see a video and it's got a lot of watch, and people that are watching it are watching all of it, and they're liking the video and leaving comments, that indicates to the algorithm that and a whole bunch of other things that maybe this is a good video that'd be worth recommending. So they don't pay us, but it does help, so thank you. But anyways, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like button. And again, if you're on on YouTube, you can subscribe right on YouTube so you don't miss any. If you're playing it in a podcast player through your service, whether Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or whatever, you can subscribe right there so you can continue to get the audio versions and be notified when new episodes are out. And please leave a comment either here on YouTube or on the website, on the show notes, and you can leave a comment there. And remember, the full show notes with relevant links and more are available. For this episode will be at robertwitham.com/episode 3, and there's a quick link to that in the description below if you want to grab it and see more. Thanks for tuning in for episode 3 of the podcast. We'll chat again next Monday in episode 4.